Hey everyone, what's going on? It's Bobby, and we are back talking about a couple cameras this time that a lot of you have been interested in. It is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K and 4K. We are not going to do a comparison review on them because that's been done hundreds of times. I'm going to take you through the journey of someone who might not be into videography or cinematography just yet, but you saw the cameras, you saw the price point, you're like, hey, this looks exciting. This looks like something I could add into my workflow. What's it like if I've never shot a camera like this? Because as a lot of you know, I'm a photographer by nature. I love photography. Videography is something I've been getting into more and more because of my personal work. Now we're doing something here with this walkthrough. This is gonna be split into three parts. First part is first impressions. Second part is using the camera. And third part is my conclusions on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema series and if it's right for you. Now I do wanna thank Blackmagic Singapore for providing the cameras and Cathay Photos for helping us with this as well. But having said that, these are our thoughts and our thoughts only, so let's get down to it. The first thing you need to take in consideration before you even put buy now on any of these cameras is you need to look at your computer to make sure it can handle the file sizes. Because when you're editing 4K content or 6K content, you need to make sure that your laptop or desktop is powerful enough. And what I mean by that is if you're going to shoot in Blackmagic RAW, which is preferred on these cameras, that's using DaVinci Resolve. And DaVinci Resolve loves graphics cards. They love powerful graphics cards. If you're using a MacBook Air or some sort of netbook or Chromebook, you're going to need to upgrade your computer or get an external graphics card, okay? If you've got a 5-year-old computer with an older processor with only 8 GB of RAM and a small hard drive, you're going to need to upgrade. So don't be one of those that buys the camera, buys all the equipment, you get home, you shoot some footage, you load up into your computer and you realize that your computer is really just ready to shut down because it can't handle it. I'll use this analogy. Don't buy marathon running shoes and act like a marathon runner if you've never run a marathon. You gotta train to utilize those shoes. Same concept with these cameras. Let's talk about my first impressions on both of these cameras. They're relatively the same. 4K uses a micro four thirds sensor. You can micro four thirds lenses on it. You can add speed boosters. We'll talk about that later on. The 6K obviously shoots in 6K, EF mount for your Canon EF lenses out there, but they look relatively the same. First thing you need to know, build quality. Both of these cameras are relatively light cameras. Now they're longer, they're not that small. They look small in pictures, they're not that small in terms of size, but they're smaller versus other cinema cameras out there. I mean, it's more of a plastic feel to them. It's not an inexpensive or cheap feel that some reviewers say. No, it's just lightweight, and of course there's a lot of heat that comes from shooting 4K and 6K, so there needs to be a material that allows heat to dissipate. That's where this material comes into play. I think that the build quality is relatively good, and you know what? They're pretty durable, but I wouldn't drop it from 10 meters up, okay? If you do that, it is plastic. The back of it, you got a 5-inch beautiful display, touchscreen display, very responsive. It is beautiful. The buttons on this camera are just enough for what you need to do. It is not overcomplicated, it's not intimidating. Blackmagic has done a great job designing these cameras for a lot of you hybrid shooters out there. What I mean by that is Sony Alpha shooters or Canon EOS R shooters or Panasonic or Nikon shooters that wanted to get a cinematography. This camera is very user-friendly in terms of design and in terms of functionality. Also speaking of cinematography, I do want to talk about the differences for a moment. A lot of you will look at this camera initially and think, hey, this looks like a Sony or a Nikon or a Canon. Why? It could perform virtually the same. No. A cinema camera is meant for one thing: optimal image quality while shooting videos. That's it. It's not meant for stills. Even though this can take snapshots, I'm not taking this out to go shoot a wedding for stills. I'm not going to take this out to shoot portraiture. No. This is meant for video quality only. If you are okay with that, then you're going to really enjoy these cameras. If you want something that I can buy that's going to take beautiful snapshots and as well as some video, you need to look elsewhere, okay? Just want to point that out to you. Let's go back and let's talk about the user interface of the Blackmagic series on these. Now, a lot of reviewers, including myself, we're going to talk about how great the user interface is on these cameras, and rightfully so. Blackmagic, along with Hasselblad with the X1D, in my personal opinion, are the two best user interfaces for any camera system out there. If you're new to cinema cameras and you're a little bit intimidated by all the functionality that's inside of them, Blackmagic has done a great job walking you through the touch menu system, making it easy to understand what to select, what doesn't work, what works with what. It's very user-friendly. Even the PDF for the instruction manual talks in layman's terms so you understand the functionality of this camera. Trust me, you're going to understand it in no time flat. There is a learning curve, of course, but with any camera there is that. but Blackmagic has done a great job. Now, there's one thing to know about cinema cameras is that there's a little bit more that you need to do to the cameras to get them going. Now, the Blackmagic Cinema, of course, they designed it to be a very friendly looking camera for a lot of you out there, but you get one battery in the box, you don't get a lens, you get a camera strap, which is nice, but that battery is not going to last you a long time, okay? 4K, 6K, it's not going to last you that long. You're gonna wanna buy a lot of batteries. Now, these are Canon LPE6 batteries. They're very common in the marketplace. There's third-party options out there that are less expensive than Canon's versions, but if you're going to buy third-party options and you have a Canon charger, it's not gonna work. Buy a third-party charger. Just a little tip for you on that. Second thing is lens mount. Now, if you have Canon EF lenses, that's great. 6K, you're gonna be right in line with that. With the 4K version, you can buy an adapter to put your EF lenses on it, but for the 6K, which I have in front of me, it will work well, but do take a note, not all Canon lenses are equal. Some have better resolving power than others. Case in point, I had the 2470 f2.8 Mark II. I put it on this camera, it fits well, but when it comes to the autofocusing, it's focusing somewhere else. But with the Sigma 1835 f1.8 that I have on this one right now, it focuses quicker, and this is a much sharper lens than the 2470 from Canon. Obviously, maybe a newer lens, and maybe it has better resolving power. Sigma lenses I've been told by Sigma Singapore, is around 8K for resolving power. There is no EVF on this. You have the display in the back of it, which doesn't swivel, doesn't move. It is one position only. So sometimes you might need to invest in a monitor, which I have here attached to this gimbal, which I'll talk about in just a second with this setup. Also, you're going to want a small rig cage, or any type of cage for that matter, because cages allow you to attach different microphones or different power sources or external drives to it. All these things you might need for your camera system to have it perform at its optimal, okay? Because out of the box, you got one small battery, you don't have any memory cards, you're gonna have to buy those. If you wanna get the CFast 2.0 cards, I recommend them, but they are expensive. UHS 2 cards, which are great, but they have limited writing speed. You can also attach SSD cards to this, or an SSD drive to this via USB 3.0. So if you're attaching that drive, you're gonna want it on top of the camera. There's nowhere to mount it, so that's where the small rig comes into play. Also, Blackmagic does make I would say a battery grip to the bottom of it. I don't have that available. It's coming soon from Blackmagic. That gives you more battery power, but just buy a lot of batteries. I'm gonna keep stressing that throughout this video because you're really gonna need them. Also, in terms of sensor size, now the 6K has a Super 35 sensor, the 4K Micro Four Thirds sensor. None of these sensors are image stabilized. So, if you want stable shots, either you're gonna have to add weight to your camera system. That's where the small rig comes into play with external grips or whatever it may be, or you might want to put it to a gimbal, which we have with the Jiyun Crane 3 Lab. All this does add a little bit of weight, but also adds functionality to the camera. I have the focus and zoom rings attached to this so I can control it from the gimbal along with the monitor. This is a heavy setup. For a setup like this, you're going to need to work out a little bit or have a monopod attached to a camera belt strap so you can balance it, because it is very heavy. But it does add a lot of stabilization to your shots, and it gives you a lot of those cool movements that you can do with the gimbals. And the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K and 4K fits very well on this gimbal. So if you wanted to know that, it fits well on the Crane 3, and it's very easy to balance. Okay, with that, we're gonna move on to part 2 of this video. Now, part 2 of this video will be me out in the field, testing the 4K and 6K, bringing back that footage to DaVinci Resolve, telling you what it's like to edit it, what it's like in terms of quality, things you can do with that footage. And then the final part of this video will be about my overall conclusions and thoughts on the Pocket Cinema 4K and 6K. Now, if you want to skip to any part of these videos, we'll put it in the description below. And with that, we'll see you in part 2.